Welcome, everybody. We're back on earlier than expected. I had a session last night, part one, on what I've called basically Australia's darkest moment in cricket, or maybe even in sport, the so-called underarm incident. I'm joined by David Graveney. How are you, David?
Fine, thanks, Norman. Absolutely fine, thank you.
And
Thank
you're off to
invite.
A funeral service, aren't you? A bit later, you said.
Yeah, for David Lawrence, who played for Gloucester and played for England. Really, really delightful man. That's had this horrendous illness, which unfortunately meant he became completely disabled, lost his power of speech. So it's been a sad episode for about 6 months, and probably his passing comes as a blessing in some ways. But I think his funeral will be really well attended by the cricketing family in the UK. So,
well, it's always sad, but it's also great that you can go and celebrate his life and in a very positive manner.
Yeah, and he was the first black person born in the UK to represent England.
Really?
Yeah. Roland Butcher played, but he was born in Barbados.
Right.
So he's a bit of a pathfinder.
Did you get some contact from Adam Hollyoak today?
I did yesterday, actually. Yeah, he sent me.
Yeah, Adam. I mentioned to Adam about, and he gave you a bit of a call.
Yeah, he's a good man. Oh,
he's a great guy.
More than a good man, he's a great man.
So what happened yesterday? We had a fellow by the name of Jim FARBANIEC. He's based in California, and he had discussions with his various friends, which includes myself and other Australians and New Zealanders, and they talked about sport in general and some of the moments of regret or bad sportsmanship or moments of darkness in sport. Or we're not necessarily talking about like the two ice skaters from America where they were performed illegal acts in their situation, but they talked about sport. They talked about, in particular, what happened in Australia in February of 1981, which of course was the Australia-New Zealand match, which in fact led to the underarm delivery or underarm incident where Greg Chappell instructed his brother Trevor to bowl what was with only 6 runs to tie, that he bowled an underarm delivery when it was totally unnecessary. And as you made a comment to me off air before, that Rod Marsh was saying no, it was one of the worst instances. So what we're doing here, Dave, we're going to elaborate further. We've got you on today. Hopefully Jim will be on deck soon. But in terms of future parts of this series, we're going to be talking to a growing audience. We're hoping to get potentially either Greg or Trevor on. I don't think Ian will come on about this. And we're going to try to expand to other players that were there on the day. We can't get a few, but we can get some. So that's the idea of this, David. It's going to be an unearthing of Australia's so-called darkest moment. But more importantly, is it the worst? What other incidents can we compare it to, et cetera, et cetera? So, David, from your perspective, where were you when this incident happened? Were you watching? We lost you for a minute. Hang on. David's just gone black there for a minute. Not sure what David is. David, are you there? David? He'll come back. There we are. Are you back, David?
All right. Can I just ask a question, Norman? Has there been any regret shown by either Greg or Trevor Chappell post the event?
If I'm being really honest with you, I would argue no.
Right. Just need to establish that. The reason that you asked me where I would have been, it would have been your winter. Sorry, your summer, so it would have been our winter over here. So it was viewed with dismay, I would have to say, in this country.
Well, I mean, Richie Benaud was on air at that moment and said that was the worst thing he's ever seen in cricket.
Well, what I would say about the whole incident is it's as opposed to sandpaper gate. So I'm not going there, but that was an illegal act to do, to tamper with the ball. This is a little bit like man-cadding. It's not illegal. It's within the rules, but not within the spirit of playing the game. And I think it's underlines in my mind that everybody who plays, doesn't matter what level it is, doesn't matter where it is in the world, they have a responsibility to uphold the ethics of the game. And this was as big a breach. And I think the reason why Richie probably said what he said is because it wasn't within the rules of the game. It's nobody stopped you doing that, but nobody's ever done it because it was perceived to be, just not acceptable. And man-cadding for me is the same thing. The people who run out the non-striker without warning, that's equally, it's within the rules, fine, but it's just not the way the game should be played.
You could also include the incident where Bairstow was run out by Carey.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's it might have been. I think after furore afterwards, the Australian captain might have intervened and said, "No, we won't carry out the appeal." But Alice Carey did nothing wrong. If the batsman was wandering out of his crease as Bairstow was trying to do, and a lot of people, actually, ironically in the Lord's Test, were standing outside of their crease, they're obliged to go backwards. And if they don't go backwards, then those wicketkeeper or fielders are around to try and run them out. I don't have a problem with that, but I think the underarm ball is so outrageous, as is man-cadding so outrageous that.
So okay, go back, David, to where you can you remember? Were you watching it as it happened, or was it something you saw the day after?
No, probably if it's day night international, it wouldn't have been. But it was cause of furore, when it became breakfast time in the UK, without doubt. I think people were in a state of shock, and you can imagine what the reaction was like at the MCC. It's been the holders of the rules of the game. They were definitely running around like headless chickens. So, it's just and knowing Greg really well, and he was a great fan of my Uncle Tom or whatever. It's such a blot on his career that if he's been held responsible for that, in light of all the other things and the pleasure he brought worldwide as one of the best players, I've never seen. I've fielded in the gully most of my life, and actually. Fielding in the gully, you can actually see how much time people have to play the ball and pick the right length. And he did that better than anybody I've ever seen. So he was an exceptional player. I'm not sure about captaincy or whatever, but this is a really, I think, a blot on his career. Which, when I asked you, has there been any apology? I'm surprised at that. I thought. He is, and this might just be an aberration. He's a better man than that normal Greg Chappell.
Yeah, and this is not really. I must make this clear as well. And Jim, the man from America, made this comment as well. This is not meant to point the finger at Greg or Trevor at all. It's more to do with the unsportsmanlike behaviour that had happened, rather than the individual itself. The fact that it was within the law, fine.
Norman, I think the rules have been amended, I think, as far as a double bouncer is called a no ball now. It bounces twice. So if you bowl it underarm, it's obviously going to bounce quite a lot of times. So the umpire would call that as a no ball. I'm not guessing. I just have a feeling that that's how it would be interpreted by the umpire. All the things that happen, Norman, if you had some really strong umpires that were around when I first started, they would have just said, "What are you trying to do? Pick it up and bowl it properly," and just
exactly. Whatever the situation is, would have
Yeah.
put some stopper on it. Can I just add the fact that what would happen? What would have happened if Ian Chappell? Now he would have probably captained over Greg, but let's just say Greg was captaining that day and Ian happened to be on the side with Trevor. Do you think Greg would have still done that? Do you think Ian may have intervened?
I don't know Ian that well. I obviously really admire his commentary, and certainly when I was involved with the England team and he was commentating in Australia, he was really very helpful about my sort of, not frustrations, about sort of talking to him about how you play spin. And he pointed out the area, because he was an exceptional player of spin. But he said the one thing about England players is that they don't like to use their feet very much, whereas in Australia they are. So, I had some dealings with him, but I would have to say that, I don't know, you'd have to ask him the question. But I suspect that as a result of the furore, that anybody you ask now, would you do it, would all say no. I bet you can't find anybody who would say yes.
Yeah. It's funny because most Australians that I talk to that have been to various discussions where these men have either been present or not, they tend to avoid the topic, don't want to bring it up, sweep it under the carpet, don't think it's worth discussing it, even though they all agree it was unsportsmanlike and not in the spirit of the match and was unnecessary. They tend not to talk about it. And that's what really worries Jim, the American, my friend, because he thought that, we certainly gave Sandpaper gave a good old discussion, and that those players being, they were taken out of the game for a period of time, albeit different circumstances. It just seems to me that we as Australians don't really want to talk about this as much as we should, or maybe reflecting on such an unsportsmanlike manner. But could
Well,
you
I
think
think
of anything else?
Norman, why they don't want to talk about it is, um, Australians quite rightly are renowned as people who play sport hard but fairly. So if you're talking about something which actually the whole world knows is unfair, then that's why it just casts a devious light on the activities of Australian cricketers. So that's why they don't want to talk about it. But there's
Yeah, I
been
mean,
plenty
look,
of other things that have happened in the game. I always have this debate about, sort of wicket keepers appealing for catches when they know it's not a catch, or appealing for LBWs when they know the bloke has hit the ball. Where do you draw the line? Whereas Australia, I think Australia have had some really refreshing rules in as far as that it's not considered as cheating if you stand when you get caught or whatever. It's very clear in Australian cricket, the umpires, that's what they're paid to do. And if they get the decisions wrong, you are
I
to
mean, you could
cheat.
also look back at the Morley incident was another one where he was no balled excessively there in Australia. The fact that Mark Waugh and Shane Warne were known to be involved with a form of being paid for information regarding
Yeah.
the weather of a certain game, I think it was. There's a few incidents for sure.
But this is the I don't know, the one that basically sort of it's exploiting a cynical view of where the game was at that time, but also the reaction of New Zealand since then. That the kit that they, people change their kit all the time, but that kit is like sort of honoured by New Zealand supporters as being worn by our team when the greatest ever injustice was performed in sport. That's how they would view it.
That's true. They certainly do make it very clear their thoughts.
Yeah,
Going back to Rod Marsh, do you know Rod Marsh? Unfortunately, he's passed, but you know
yeah.
him very well. And you remember his reaction at the time when he was almost verbally, you could be heard on the audio saying, no, no, no. He was even mimicking, no, not to do it. Very interesting.
No,
With
but that would be Rod. Rod would, you know, the combination of Rod, Dennis Lilly, Jeff Thompson, that's pretty aggressive cricket, but within the rules. The English batsmen would say when they were in their pomp, it was one of the scariest atmospheres to walk into, because the Australians would let them know what was going on. But Rod, that would be very typical of Rod. You know, and he would, well, he'd make up his own mind anyway. But he comes from an environment with his brother being a professional golfer. That, you know, and golf is an extraordinary sport, Norman. They referee themselves. You know, if something happened with the ball moving or whatever, they actually call it themselves. And if they don't, they're reviewed as so. It's not another part. It's not like an umpire or anything like that. You know, they will work out that they have been granted some advantage, either intentionally or most of the time unintentionally, and they call a penalty on themselves, which is a refreshing sport to happen. So it doesn't come as any great surprise. Rod had been the type of bloke, and you know him as well as I do, or did know him as well as I do, because he was, again, the three deaths in Australian cricket and Australia as a country, the world, with Rod Marsh dying, Shane Warne, and Andrew Simons dying, all within close proximity.
Amazing.
It's just unbelievable for that to happen. So, you know, I learned, and I only worked with Rod for a while. I know he found it in deep down to be considered as an English selector is very uncomfortable, I think he put it as. But I learned a lot more about living and life just in his company. He was a remarkable person, as the other two guys were as well. So I'm not.
Well, that
surprised.
whole era, that 1970s team was amazing.
Yeah, and you know, they lived. To be fair, Norman, they lived in the fast lane, both on and off the pitch, but they played within the rules. So I don't. I'm not surprised by Rod's reaction, but you know, the reaction is one thing. No. He could have actually come from behind the stumps and picked the ball up if he really thought it was that bad. I think the Australian players might have been surprised that was the route that they were going to go down. Fortunately, 6 needed off 1 ball. It's never been repeated. But I think the rules in the game prevent it. That if the ball bounces twice, it's a no ball anyway. So.
Well, Trevor Chappell, I think it really affected Trevor Chappell beyond that point. Greg Chappell went on and played, I think, many more. It was well and truly involved with cricket beyond that point. But Trevor Chappell's career took a nosedive after that. I think it really affected him. I think his career was rather short anyway, but I think it was compounded by that. And he certainly had issues with his health. I'm not saying it's directly related to that, but it did affect Trevor for a longer period, a much more pronounced and longer period. Whereas Greg was a celebrated cricketer.
That's why I was intrigued in terms of what sense of remorse, not apology, remorse shown by those involved. You know, Trevor Chappell was never heard of again. You know, and I know that, though he probably does deny it, that, you know, Cameron Bancroft has been found guilty for life, basically.
Well, they keep saying he's going to play again for Australia. He'll never play for Australia.
Yeah,
he's gone.
So yeah.
So Trevor Chappell's your age, by the way, David. He's almost identical to your age.
Yeah, he is. You know,
Greg's about 3 or 4 years older than you, and then I think
I played against Trevor as well. So
did you?
Well, I always felt he was. It's a bit like the Curran brothers. Ben Curran's just made his debut for Zimbabwe, but he's the brother between Tom and Sam. And sometimes when that happens, it's a difficult position to be in. So he was always the sort of the other brother to Greg and to Ian. So I'm not surprised it affected his life.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to live that down.
Yeah, but I'm surprised he didn't also sort of just show some remorse. I think that would have been the perfect response. You know, everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And he needed to apologise to the game, basically, and to New Zealand in particular. That you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and in the end, it shouldn't happen. I'm amazed that has never happened.
I mean, both Ian and Greg Chappell, when people mention their names, they think of captaincy, centuries, great victories, great sides, great players. But when you mention Trevor Chappell, almost everybody talks about, well, brother of Ian and Greg, but
Yeah,
he is synonymous with the underarm incident more than anything else he achieved.
but it wasn't his decision. That's the thing.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Very sad.
But
But it was interesting.
it'd be interesting to see the comments get for other quarters. I must admit,
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to finish on was, can you think of anything in any other sport that would match this unsportsmanlike behaviour that you've come across in your life, whether it be tennis
it happened in amateur golf, not necessarily professional golf, because there's too many TV cameras around. Of golfers affecting or making the lie of the ball artificially better than it was naturally. See what I mean? You know, sort of moving it, or there's been the odd instance like that, but I can't think of anything quite as blatant as that. And also, you know, the last ball of the match. So it was a defining moment in the game. There might have been other instances in other sports during the game, but not as the last act. Makes it stand out more than anything else. So
absolutely.
Gamesmanship exists. It exists in cricket. So I'm not naive. You know, I know that people, and that was the thing about sandpaper games. It's not as if people haven't been tampering with the ball for years. And you know, I spoke to my dad about it, and he said, "Well, we used to do all sorts of things, put talcum powder on the ball and whatever. People scratching the ball to make a reverse swing. So that's all. Well, that's legal. This is the one definition about this thing. It wasn't illegal at the time. I think it's now illegal now because of the ball bouncing more than once.
Well, as he said, it's not illegal now. It's just it's no ball, or it's a
Yeah,
dead
but that's
ball.
legal. So yeah, so if you attempted to roll it along the ground, it would be called a no ball. So the umpire should step in, and have made them even before the rule change to say, you know, we're not playing the game like this. You bowl the ball properly. And if you want to play,
I heard Michael Vaughan talking with a few people at a podcast the other day about unsportsmanlike behaviour of the more current times, like even the Kerry incident with Bairstow and a few other things that have gone on. But they didn't touch on this particular incident. I guess they're looking at more contemporary situations. But
that's a while ago. So, but
it's 44 years ago, to be precise.
I think it's really good to highlight it as a warning that actually there is a way to play the game. And then there were incidents in the Lord's Test match that got a bit spicy, but that's how cricket should be played. You know, people play with passion. You know, I'm sure they have lots of incidents in Australian rules. Seems to me there's everybody rowing with each other most of the time. So so that's where we're at. So hopefully it never happens again. What would close the book for me, and if it's happened, great. If it hasn't, even if it's 40 years later, some sort of regret shown by those who were participating in it, I think would close the book forever.
Talking about losses of people as well, we lost Gordon Rourke, who of course was synonymous with the back foot no ball rule that had to be changed to front ball. I actually interviewed him with Brian Booth some years ago together.
Tom said it was frightening, absolutely frightening, because by where the point of delivery was like 2/3 down the wicket.
Wow!
So they had to practice in the UK with somebody bowling off 16 yards. So it was, but the game changed. They changed that sort of rule. So
what's the story with Mankad now, David? Because I know Dipti Sharma, the Indian bowler, the women's bowler, did a Mankad not long ago, and she at a crucial moment in a match. What's the story? Can you do that?
You can do it, yeah, but I think there's now sort of unwritten rules in terms of you give the batsman, if you suggest he's getting a bit of a flyer, you know, he doesn't, the bowler doesn't have to give him a warning, but I think that I think there's sort of unwritten rule that, particularly for the captains, if they suspect that's happening, because if you hit it to long off and long on, if you get a flyer from when you're running and you're a real athlete, you can get back to the boulders then. It's virtually impossible to be run out. So, again, there are some areas in the game where the umpires have got to sort of get a bit more involved. And if they can see if somebody's trying to sort of get out of their crease too quickly, then just say, the umpire says to the batter, I can see what you're trying to do. If you continue to do that, you run the risk of being run out.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
There are things that the umpires just need to be stronger about what they're doing. The same, stronger about all these, people are going on and on about sort of they're not bowling the overs in time. Well, stop all these people running onto the pitch. It's not as if we didn't play in hot temperatures when we played. I know rehydration is a big thing, but just, two batsmen go to the wicket, and then somebody sadly gets out within 5 or 10 minutes, and the other guy, non-striker, wants a drink. What's all that about? Just speed the game.
What about the incidents recently where in particular, the Indian batters walk away from the crease just as the bowl's about to bowl? Happened quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, but again, umpire, get on with the game. It's like you see, like Wimbledon's just been on for the last couple of weeks, Norman. And people who are trying to break up the rhythm of the other person are now getting warnings from the umpire. Speed up, because you're depriving. It's a cynical attempt to disrupt the rhythm of the play, but that happens in cricket. When you're under pressure, you try and break the rhythm of the bowler who just wants to get back to his end mark and bowl the next ball. But that's all part and parcel of the game. But the umpires have got to get more involved.
I think they do, and even when it comes to ball selection too.
Oh yeah, well I can remember when one of the first series I was involved, there were two balls offered to the opposition. One was a Duke and one was a Reader. The Reader qualities were reverse swan. So we're playing Pakistan. So we said, well, which ball would you like to use? Of course, they're going to choose the Reader because they had experience of playing in reverse swing. So there are some issues around the ball, I must admit, about changing it, and I think some of it is poor manufacturing. So we will see. Norman, I'm going to have to go to this funeral.
Well, thank you, David, for joining me today.
No, that's fine. Any others?
Have a good time meeting up with some old friends, I'm sure, at this funeral. I hope everything goes well.
And I'll speak to you next week before the next test.
Okay, David, for sure. Take care. Thank you, David.
All right.
It was great to have David Graveney and his perspective on the so-called underarm incident. He's a great guy. And he knew Rod Marsh and Greg Chappell very well. Wasn't as close to Ian, because Ian, being 81, I think these days, Greg's close to 76, and Trevor's 72. So Trevor was more David's age. But yeah, incredible insights in a moment that was certainly unsportsmanlike in its behaviour, even though it was within the rules. Australia tends not to talk about it very much. We'll try and get more and more people on to discuss this. A lot more to unpack there, I think. But yeah, it's been great to be able to talk to David today. My dinner's about to arrive very shortly. I've got a lovely green curry, Thai green curry, which I love. I'll be having that. So you can see Tendulkar in the top corner here, ringing the Lord's bell. Was only recently. I'll try and match that up a bit later. So my order's just arrived, actually. It's almost there, so that's great. All right, guys, well, stay tuned on Eyes on Sports with Norman Constantine, or Eyes on Cricket with Norman Constantine. So please view, like, and share, and please hit the subscribe button and notification button for any future live performances. In fact, this was the 600th live that I've done, well over 1,300 overall, but 600 that are live. So I'm very proud of that, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please stay tuned for more, and we'll talk again and again about the topics we've had discussion. So Norman Constantine on Eyes on Sports, Eyes on Cricket with Norman Constantine. Take care.